Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Anthony John Agnello, Senior Social Editor at Games Radar, and we are at Eidos, Montreal, hanging out with the team that is making Deus Ex: Mankind Divided. This is one of those dudes right now. This is Scczepkowski, the Executive Audio Director on Deus Ex: Mankind Divided. Steven, how the hell do you go about figuring out what the world sounds like when everybody is trying to kill themselves after robot people turned into zombies?
I like how you put it. Yeah, no, it's definitely an interesting challenge. We work very closely with narrative. We work very closely with level design, cinematics. Pretty much the department that has to kind of wield in with almost everybody.
Yeah.
But you take everything you get, you start seeing where the vision's going, and then you align yourself with it, you know, and again, there's a lot of sounds that we're able to reproduce that are still based in somewhat today's world. You know, a good example I always give is like washing machines or washers and dryers. They've been around since the 50s. They haven't changed their sound that much. They're quieter and they obviously work more efficiently, but if you were to take apart the guts in that, they probably all still work pretty much similar with belts and stuff. So we're trying to use that sort of philosophy because the world we're talking about is only 15 years ahead. So we're not talking Star Wars. It's not like, you know, all of a sudden nothing sounds like anything we're accustomed to. So we keep that in mind, and I feel that people will naturally gravitate and accept a sound a lot easier if they feel it's based in reality, if that makes sense. It's almost like your brain is going to look at this and go, yes, and it's already moved on to 20 other things. Whereas if it doesn't work, your brain stops right there and says, no, look at that. And then you're like, well, why is that cow making a cat sound? That's not right. And why did they do that? And now like the whole immersion is broken and you're wondering what happened in that moment. That's what we want to avoid.
See, I'm fascinated by the way you create that atmosphere that people aren't going to notice, the way that you sort of foster that feeling of reality.
Yeah.
Like when you're looking at a horror movie and you put, you know, that blank tone in a room.
Yep.
People think it's silence. It's not silence.
It's never silence.
So what are you doing to sort of make like a feel for the future that is natural, that somebody's not going to notice? What are you actually putting in the background?
Well, that's a great question. I'll tell you, what we do is like the world, let's say, stops here. The physical world, like your character can't go past this point.
Right.
Our audio stops somewhere about here.
Right.
Because we're creating the world beyond where you can go to, and that's what makes it credible. When you're walking in the city, you may hear, you know, a train miles away. You're walking around, you're hearing little sounds that you would associate with a normal city hub. It's the biggest challenge that we have is to how do we make this world come alive? How do we do things that make the player really feel like they're in this world?
What's the weirdest thing that you've had to do to create a natural sound that you don't have access to? You don't have access to a giant robot arm with,
No.
you know, fiber optic musculature.
Or do I?
Or
At home, in my garage.
does everybody here have swords in their arms? Is that a thing?
Well, when you get hired at Eidos, they give you one. It's
They
an
give-
implant. After 5 years, you get the sword
You get-
arm. After 10 years, they give you the Tesla.
So 20
20
days
years,
vacation.
I'll be fully augmented. In 20 years from now, I'll be a 70-year-old completely augmented machine.
So what have you had? What sounds have you had to just make up from scratch, and how'd you do it?
I'll tell you, one of my favorite stories is the drone. That took a year of iteration.
Whoa.
Literally, like, just throwing it to different people on my team, and all right, why don't you try and run with it for a few months. We had to go, and in the end, I think we went and synced up with the concept artist and the creative director, and we said, look, we have a vision of the drone, and we would like it to sound kind of like this. Do you think we could kind of create the model to go along with this sort of feel? And you've seen the drone in the E3 demos and that, and they gave it kind of, originally it looked a lot different, and in the end they streamlined it and gave it almost an insect wasp type form, and I always wanted that sort of insect sound. Now, we weren't getting it. I kept always saying, it always sounds like some crappy lawnmower across the street. I'm like, because, you know, you're going with that sort of carbon-based motor. And then once we threw that idea out and said, okay, forget about like normal engines. Just go with something that sounds cool. I don't care what the logic is. For once, usually it's like, well, what's the logic and does it make sense? But this time I said, I don't care. I want something that's cool. So in the end, listening, the guy had like 30 sounds lined up, but it was getting closer because I think I had an idea, and we were getting closer, and we had the sound, and I said, that's the sound, that's it right there, and we were really excited. Then we put it in the game, and it wasn't reacting the way I wanted it to, and the problem was is you had this cool sound, but then when you get 3 or 4 other drones, and it's the same sound, the way audio works is, all it does is the volume stacks on top. Right. So now the drone, instead of eating this much up on the audio palette, it's eating this much. And it's creating more noise than cool. So we're like, oh, that's not what I wanted. And I don't know, I was mowing my lawn. Like, I seem to have some of my better ideas when I'm doing something completely, like, mindless labor, you know?
It's the shower principle.
Yes.
You're always more creative in the shower.
So I'm mowing my lawn, and in my head, I'm like, well, what if we changed the bass tone? And because I'm a musician, so I'm like, if you had 3 of them, why can't they create a chord? And I'm like, instead of the same sound, I have this one, and this one will be a 3rd higher, and this one will be a 5th. Now, when you got them together, instead of it just getting loud, it just got wide, and it stayed at this level, but the sound was like this, like it just felt like it was eating in everywhere.
Everyone see him!
I look at Mankind Divided, and there are these wonderful little bits of like the fake culture. Like you pick up the newspaper and there's an ad for like a fake MMA fight. Yeah. And that stuff's awesome. I love that. Yeah. When do I get to hear augmented musicians making like rock or R&B cool. in that world?
I'm gonna steal all that for the next game.
Right?
No, that's true. It's interesting. I mean, in HR, we had one tiny little moment of the guy in the metro station, kind of like he was like an augmented hobo, and he was kind of breakdancing out and doing some kind of funky thing. And it was funny, even with that, I remember, because it was kind of like a quirky animation, and I remember my sound designer, he was like trying all kinds of sort of like 80s hip-hop beats, and I'm like, none of that is going to work. I'm like, you need to go...
He's doing like Rapper's Delight.
Yeah, and I'm like, no, you need to go like full psycho. You need to go with something completely ridiculous. Yeah. And I said, that's the only way it'll work, because I said his movements are kind of ridiculous. The other guy in the room turned around and he played a track. It was basically him and a drummer that had done this, and it was just some really crazy like hardcore thrash, and I'm like that. I'm like, what is that? And he's like, well, that's my track. I said, can we put that in the game? I said, that works.
Nice.
And we did. So it's definitely something interesting for me to think going forward. One thing we did do in Human Revolution, and fans really seemed to like it, and for me, I loved doing it, was the sort of homage to the first game and the great work like Alex Brandon had done, was that, you know, we made sure that when you found the pirate radios, he would often talk, and then he would segue off, and then you would get some tracks from the original Deus Ex.
Adam Jensen does strike me as a classical guy. Like
classical music?
Like, well, like I'm thinking more like classic rock. I can see him sitting around, and I guess like what would be classic rock to him? He'd probably be like listening to like early White Stripes, and that would be like vintage oldies to Adam Jensen.
I think I could see him being definitely a sort of working class rock. You know, like
right.
Like I'm not gonna go Springsteen because maybe that's going too far back.
Tom Petty?
Tom Petty, I think I could see him liking, like No Back Down, Won't Back Down, and stuff like this. Yeah. And definitely just some of, you know, I mean, Allman Brothers and stuff, like, you know, Skinnerd.
Completely.
I think Adam would definitely be all over that.
That promo shot of him, like, smoking a cigarette in his living room, I can see all that happening.
There you go.
Steve Scczepkowski, Deus Ex Mankind Divided is out in February 2016. Thanks so much, man.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, folks, thanks for watching, and if you want to see more great GR Plus videos, well, our YouTube page is right over here, and if you want to get your READ read on, the GR Plus website is right over there.